G'day legends, welcome back to Max Power Cardboard Collectibles. Hope you're well, hope you are happy, hope you're living your best life as always, and yeah, welcome. This is going to be a fun one today. We are going to be picking our ultimate all-Australian team of the 1990s. It's going to be the first in a series of videos we're going to do one for the 90s, the noughties, the 2010s, and then we'll probably compile all that together and make an ultimate all-Australian team of the AFL era. It's going to be a lot of fun. Hope you're ready for it. Let's get it. Alright guys, so glad to have you here as we pick our ultimate all-Australian team of the 1990s. This one's going to be a bit of fun, but look, before we get stuck into that, never fear, we are still primarily a card content channel. I'm not going full like AFL Nuffy YouTuber sort of deal, but this is a sort of an idea of something I've had for a little while. I thought it would be really fun to go through for those of you who are my age and older who actually remember the 90s, and also for those who are a little bit younger who might even not know some of the names we're going to talk about today. But look, it's going to be a bit of fun, but before we get stuck into that, don't forget guys, links to the socials, the eBay store, and everything's going to be downstairs in the description. Also a link to we're going to do a little tipping comp this year. I thought it might be fun, so get involved with that. There'll be a link to that downstairs in the description as well. There will be a prize for the person who wins it. I don't know what yet. I wouldn't be expecting a heap, but we will definitely have a prize for the person who wins the tipping comp. So look, if you feel like, obviously that's going to be card related as well, you know, but look, if that is something that you feel like getting involved with, just hit that link downstairs in the description and get involved with that. Obviously, if you're going to join the tipping comp, maybe try to be a subscriber. I feel like that only seems fair, right? But yeah, we are absolutely going to be smashing out the card content this year, so never fear. But look, it's the off season. Look, we're probably still a couple of weeks away for a Footy Stars announcement, right? That can't be too far away, given that we are mid-February at the moment. So yeah, look. Now that that's all out of the way, let's just set up the rules for what we've done today. So obviously, look, we are picking an all-Australian team of the 1990s. All right, there's a few basic rules that go around this, right? So one, players that we select in a certain line must have been named at least once in that position or line, right? So, you know, if we're naming someone as a back pocket, they've got to be named as a back pocket, you know? This also extends to the bench. So, if we're picking a player who's going to be on our bench for this team, they have to have been named at least once on the bench in an all-Australian team between 1990 and 1999. That's pretty much the up and down of it. I've tried to also make it seem like this is a team that could actually play a real game of football in real life as well. You know, we're not just like all our back flanks and forward flanks and bench isn't all just the best midfielders, you know? So this team has got to sort of function a little bit as well. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it for the rules. Yeah, let's get cracking. Okay guys, so starting off in defense in the left back pocket, the first player selected in our 1990s All-Australian Team of the Decade is going to be none other than West Coast legend Guy McKenna. 267 games for West Coast, 3 times named in the All-Australian Team in the 90s in 91, 93 and 94, all in a back pocket or maybe a back flank. There might have been one of them in there as well. Look, he was a premiership player in 92 and 94. Look, super smart defender, really reliable with ball in hand. Always remember feeling pretty safe when Guy McKenna had the footy. He loved an intercept mark, big sliding chest marks off opposition kicks. Yeah, look, not really too much else to name here. He was by far and away one of the better small defenders of the 90s and had some of the most appearances in the All-Australian team. So that is what we have named Guy McKenna in our left back pocket of our All-Australian Team of the Decade. The next player selected in the right back pocket, we have Ben Hart from the Adelaide Crows. Played 311 games over 14 seasons, was a 3-time All-Australian in the back pocket in 1992, 1993 and 1999. Also won the Malcolm Blight Medal for the Crows in 1999. He's in the Adelaide Team of the Decade in the back pocket. Certainly deserves this spot here. Absolute champion of the 90s. Ben Hart for the Adelaide Crows. All right, so coming in next at fullback, I'm pretty sure anyone who was around in the 90s know who this is going to be, and it is none other than Stephen Silvani from the Carlton Footy Club. 3-time All-Australian fullback, 94, 95, 96. A 2-time All-Australian centre halfback in 98 and 99. 312 games played. Named fullback in the AFL Team of the Century and rocked the sleeves every single week. That is right, ladies and gentlemen, every single week. One of the easiest selections for me for this team. Rightly so, our All-Australian fullback of the 1990s, Stephen Silvani, the big sauce. Moving on to the defensive flanks now, and in the left halfback flank, we are going to have Nigel Smart from the Adelaide Crows, marking the second appearance from an Adelaide Crow player in our All-Australian defence. Look, he was an All-Australian player in 1991 in a back pocket. He was an All-Australian bench player in 93 and was named on the back flank in 1998. Won premierships with the Crows in 1997, 1998. Halfback flank for Adelaide's team of the decade, and he also loved to really get forward and kick a few snags. Kicked way more goals than you'd think that a defender would have kicked back then. But probably Nigel Smart's most famous act was not on the footy field. He also famously walked over hot coals in Adelaide's OG controversial preseason camp in 1992, where he actually suffered blistering and third-degree burns on both of his feet. Funnily enough, after he was the first person to complete this trial, he was always the last, as the exercise was called off immediately after he had walked over these hot coals. All right, so moving on to our centre-half back position, and that is going to none other than Paul Roos. This one was pretty straightforward, to be honest. He was named All-Australian 4 times in 1991, 92, 96 and 97. Was captain of the side in 91 and 92, where he was named at centre-half back and full-back respectively. Look, pretty straightforward. I think he forms a really formidable key-back duo with Stephen Silvani. Not really much more to add here. 356 games, mostly at Fitzroy, a few up the road in Sydney. But look, also adds important leadership to the back line. And if you actually go back and have a look at the numbers of key defenders for the 90s in the All-Australian teams, it was Paul Roos and Sauce. Like, there's no other real way to look at it. So that's what we're going with. Pretty straightforward one here with Paul Roos named at centre-half back. All right, now, if you thought our back line was looking strong already, you would be absolutely right. But it is about to get a hell of a lot stronger, because our last on-field defender on the right back flank is going to be none other than the man from South Fremantle, Glenn Jakovich. Only named All-Australian twice, and both at centre-half back. This might seem like it kind of breaks rules a little bit with what I said out in the intro, but look, given that this team has to function like a real team, and we will be playing 3 key forwards, but we will get to those later, we need to have another tall defender here. And I think Jacko, it might seem like this defense is a little bit oversized, but Jacko was a lot like a modern defender. He wasn't hugely tall. He was under, I think, I think he was only 196, 195. Might have even been a bit less than that, to be honest. But he played a lot like a modern defender. You know, he could play tall, he could play smaller. He was great overhead, but as an intercept marker, but it was also a lot quicker than he looked. Loved going for big runs up the flank and delivering into the forward line. So look, I think that's sort of why Jacko gets the nod. Just very versatile. And also, look, if we're going to play who we're going to play at centre-half forward, we've got to have Jacko in the team, because it wouldn't be a team of the 90s without... Anyway, we'll get to that later. But look, I think that's pretty much it for the back 6. I think that's looking pretty damn tasty with Sauce, Roos, Jacko as our sort of bigger defenders, and then Guy McKenna, Hart and Smart as our smaller defenders. I think that works really well. I'm pretty happy with that. There's a few guys here that were probably unlucky to miss, but really probably only 2, and they were really small defenders. As I said earlier, the pool for key defenders in the 1990s was actually pretty small, and there was really only the 2 clear standouts, and then Jakovich as well. So look, the 2 that were probably unlucky to miss would be David King or Ken Hinckley. They were both named twice in All-Australian teams in defence, but to be honest, I think this is easily the best 6. So this is what we're rolling with. That is our All-Australian defence of the 90s. So moving on to the centre line now, and this is where things start to get a little bit fun as well. And we're going to start on the left wing, and it is none other than the man, the myth, the legend, Peter Matera, second West Coast player named in this team in a row. Now, you might think this is my West Coast bias coming out, is that we've had now 7 players named, and 3 of them have been from the West Coast Eagles, but the Eagles in the 90s were a force, and that's why. I mean, they were probably the dominant team of the 90s, with probably Hawthorn and the Bombers and a couple of other teams, but really, you know, the West Coast team of the 90s was essentially the WA State squad. There was no Fremantle in the league, the waffle was super strong, and they were a dominant force. So there will be West Coast players in this team, and a fair few of them don't you worry about that. But this guy, holy hell. So this is a lay down misère. This is not, you cannot say that Peter Matera on the wing of an All-Australian team of the 90s is anything other than a straight up fact, people. 5 times All-Australian in the 90s. 91, 93, 94 on the wing, and then named it half back on 96 and 97. Probably could have named him on a flank, but let's face it, Peter Matera is a wingman. Look, 2 times premiership player, won the Norm Smith in 1992, where he had 18 disposals, 4 marks, and 5 goals from the wing, if you don't mind. I was just a kid when that game was on. I was about, I would have been probably 6, 7 years old, and I'll never forget the call of Peter Matera from 55 sets sail for home. That's an iconic moment in football. That pretty much sealed the deal for the first time a club outside of Victoria won the AFL Grand Final. Look, what else have we got for Matera? Indigenous team of the century in the VFL, AFL, Italian team of the century. You just, look, if you're too young to remember Peter Matera, type him into YouTube and go watch some highlights. It's insane. You'll thank me later. Peter Matera, left wing, lock it in, Eddie. Next up, we have our first midfielder, or our centreman, or our ruck rover, whatever you want to call it. And for the 90s, that was none other than Greg Diesel Williams. Diesel Williams was the ultimate first-touch midfielder, played a very similar style to what Lachie Neale sort of plays today, extracting the ball from clearance and feeding it out to the more outside players, and also sometimes just running out of the front of the stoppage and delivering to the forward line. He was named in the All-Australian team twice in the 90s, 93 and 94, where he was also named captain in 94. He was also named in the All-Australian centre line in 87 and 89, which, look, I know this is an All-Australian team in the 90s, but you sort of, it sort of runs on the board kind of deal with him. He also won Brownlows in 86 and 1994, a premiership and a Norm Smith in 95. He's in both Sydney's and Carlton's team of the century. I mean, what more do you want? What more do you want? It has to be Greg Williams. And just a quick side note on the centre line as a whole, like, I haven't mixed all the midfielders up, right? So if you're named in the centre, you're named in the centre on ground like we have here. So yeah, just so you know, that was it. So all the other midfielders will be taken from the followers sort of tab. So just so you know what we're doing here as well. But yeah, I don't think you can go past Diesel Williams. And repping it up for like really short blokes everywhere, So I'm down with that too. He was, I don't know, he was probably under 180 centimeters or somewhere around there, which back in the 90s actually wasn't that uncommon. It's really only been since probably the mid-noughties where your average midfielder's like 6'2", So anyways, Diesel Williams, absolute champion. He is going to be our centreman in this team. So yeah, there it is. All right, so moving on to our right wing now. Not that kind of right wing. And there's only one person we can name here, and that is Shane Crawford. That's right, Shane Crawford from the Hawks. All-Australian selections in 96, 98, 99, and another cheeky one in 02. It's funny, I always remembered Crawf as more of a noughties player, but definitely played a lot of his best footy in the 90s. 305 games over 17 seasons, all at Hawthorn, and don't they just love him? Look, as the only other player than Matera who had multiple appearances on an All-Australian wing, there was no one else you could really name here, but that doesn't mean that Shane Crawford doesn't absolutely deserve his spot in this team. Absolute champion of the game, and wasn't it great seeing him win that grand final in the last year of his career? Fantastic.
That's what I'm talking about!
So that's it. That's it for the main centre line. We've got Matera, we've got Diesel, and we've got Shane Crawford. I think that's pretty bloody strong. So yeah, we'll crack on to the rest of the midfield now. So we're going to start with the ruckman, and look, this one's again pretty straightforward, as there was only one person who was named multiple times in the ruck in the All-Australian team in the 90s, and that is the one and only late Jim Stynes. Was All-Australian in 91 and 93, a 4-time BNF winner at Melbourne. Was named on the interchange of Melbourne's team of the century. And look, to be honest, ruckmen were kind of not an afterthought in the 90s, but this was sort of probably the first guys, probably since Polly Farmer, to really, I get not revolutionize the way, that's a word, not to really revolutionize the way that the ruck position was played, but he was kind of one of the first of those real mobile ruckmen who got around and got possessions around the ground with elite endurance and good skills. I'm thinking your Dean Cox, your Brodie Grundys, etc., So, for that alone, you know, you kind of got to give him some respect. I mean, obviously, you got to give Jim Stynes all the respect. He's an absolute champion of the era and of the game. But, you know, one thing that sort of gets swept under the rug a little bit with Jim Stynes was his insane durability. So, in 1996, he broke Jack Titus's record of playing 205 consecutive AFL games, and that record had stood for 53 years. So, look, I don't think you can argue that in the 90s, Jim Stynes was the man in the ruck. And, you know, look, guys like Dean Cox have credited Jim Stynes with being a huge inspiration to the way that he plays the game. So, absolute champion there. We might talk more about Dean Cox in the noughties and 2010s. We'll have a look at that. But absolutely, for the All-Australian team of the 90s, the only man that can be in the ruck is the one and only Jim Stynes. All right, moving on to our second midfielder spot, and standing next to Greg Williams, we are going to have none other than Robert Harvey from the Saints. Now, I always remember Robert Harvey being a very good footballer, but I didn't realize how dominant he actually was from a statistics and accolades point of view, right? Check this out. So, 383 games, that's right, nearly 400 games, an 8-time All-Australian, that's right, you heard right, 8-time All-Australian, 92, 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, and then again in 03, a 2-time Brownlow medalist in 1997 and 1998, AFL MVP, Lee Matthews Trophy in 97, played 21 seasons at AFL level. That is insanity. That is pure insanity. There is no one else. This guy is the guy of the 90s midfield. We've got to put him in there. It's Robert Harvey all day, every day. Thank you, mother, for the rabbits. That's it. Coming in next to Robert Harvey, the absolute champion that he is, in our third midfield spot, and might I just add as a precursor to this, good luck winning a clearance against this team, let me tell you, because our third midfielder is going to be none other than Nathan Buckley from the Collingwood Magpies. 280 games played, mostly for Collingwood. He did have that one season up at the Brisbane Bears in his rookie year in 93, in which he did win the Rising Star. 7-time All-Australian, so not quite as good as Robert Harvey, but still pretty bloody good. 96, 97, 98, 99, plus 3 in the noughties. 6-time Copeland Trophy winner. Won a cheeky Brownlow in 2003, I think it was. Look, I know it's not in the 90s, but again, it kind of runs on the board stuff. And look, yeah, you got to put him in there. Bucks now rounds out a very strong midfield for us. Very powerful. Again, good luck winning a clearance with Jim Stynes tapping it down to these three. You know, if it's Harvey blocking for Williams, Buckley blocking for Harvey, or just all of them attacking the footy and storming out the front of the stoppage. I mean, yeah, good luck, and the forwards will be absolutely lapping that up. All right, so looking at this midfield as a whole, the one criticism I can see people having about this, and I do somewhat agree if we're just looking at it from a purely on-field point of view, and that is this midfield is a bit one-paced, too many big, heavy, sort of in and under guys with Harvey and Bucks, and then Greg Williams as well. You might think it's a bit one-paced, and I will totally understand that criticism. However, when we get to the naming our bench players, you'll definitely see that, you know, we got a lot of talented guys with a lot of outside speed coming off the bench here. It's going to be very much the guys that are coming in to chop these guys out is going to change the dynamics of this midfield greatly. The one thing was that because of the rules we'd sort of set out about having to be named in the midfield or on the bench, etc., that's why we've had to do it like this. But to be honest, like, name me an AFL club that wouldn't kill to have Peake, Williams, Buckley, and Harvey as their starting 3 midfielders. I mean, you know, please. All right, guys, the time has finally arrived for us to name our forward line in the All-Australian team of the 90s, and this is going to be fun, right? Like, 90s forwards were absolutely off their heads, the absolute rock stars of the AFL in the 90s were the big power forwards. So, look, what we're going to do, we're going to ease into it. We're going to start with the flanks. And our first flanker that we're going to name in our All-Australian team of the 90s is none other than James Hird. All-Australian, and you might think of him as more of a noughties guy, but to be honest, like, because the 90s was dominated by big, bustling key forwards, it's actually kind of hard to find flankers who were named multiple times. And to be honest, there were really only 2 smaller forwards that were named in the All-Australian twice. And we'll get to the controversial pick in the forward pocket a little bit later. But one of those was James Hird, and he was named in 96 and 97 in the forward line, both as a forward flanker. He was also named 3 times All-Australian in the noughties, but we might get get to that in the next video. 5 times BNF winner for Essendon, including 3 times in a row from 94 to 96. Won the Brownlow in 1996 and was also Essendon's leading goal kicker in 95 and 96. Look, early in his career, obviously played a lot more as a forward mid and kind of always had that forward craft about his game, even into the noughties and beyond. But yeah, definitely earlier in his career, he was more of a forward mid rather than a mid forward. And to be honest, if you actually go through and look at all the numbers, he's the obvious choice here. No one else really came close to being named on a forward flank. That is of a smaller variety. So yeah, James Hird, first forward flank. All right, moving on to the next forward flank now. And this one's one I sort of didn't expect. Like I knew this guy was good, but sort of I didn't really think we'd be putting him in the team of the decade, you know? And that goes to your boy, Gary Lyon. Gary was a 3-time All-Australian, 93, 94, 95, all named on a forward flank, 2-time BNF winner in 1990 and 1994, 2-time leading goal kicker of Melbourne. He was the captain of Melbourne from 91 to 97. And look, he might be a bit of a flog in his post-footy life, but the numbers do back it up. Gary Lyon was a force in the AFL when he wasn't carrying on like a pork chop on the stretcher.
Of course, with Gary Lyon probably being carried up from the furthest point of the ground.
And look, he sort of just has to be there. The numbers, just by the numbers alone, he has to be there. Look, to be honest, look, post-footy life for Gary, look, I know he's had his whole things and definitely wouldn't want him hanging out with my missus on the weekends, but look, to be honest, I actually don't mind Gary's media work. I think he sees the game pretty well, and he's and a lot better than some of the other pundits out there. So I definitely rather listen to Gary Lyon than Kane Corns, let me tell you. All right, now this is where things start to get a little bit fun. So we are going to name our centre-half forward as the one and only King Carey, Wayne Carey. It can't be anyone else. 7-time All-Australian from 93 onwards to 2000 through the noughties. 4 times All-Australian captain, 93, 98, 99 and 2000. 2-time premiership winner with North Melbourne in 96 and 99. That's another thing about the 90s. North Melbourne were actually good. He was a 2 times Lee Matthews Trophy winner in 95 and 98. And to be honest, the 90s belonged to Wayne Carey. He is widely regarded as the greatest to ever play the game. And in 1999, Lee Matthews himself declared Carey the greatest player he had ever seen play the game. Carey has to be named centre-half forward of this team. He was the dominant player of the 90s. And look, as much as he does seem to have turned into an absolute gronk of a human being, and quite possibly he might have always been, you cannot deny his talent, and he just has to be named at centre-half forward. And going back to my earlier point when we were doing the defenders, this is why we have to have Glenn Jakovic in this team, because if you were playing the matchup to look forward to in the 90s was Jakovic versus Carey. It was kind of like, oh, what would you liken it to now? You know, I mean, it's hard to even think about, you know, but it was, people would tune in, even if you didn't support North or West Coast, you would tune in to watch Jakovic versus Carey. Carey probably had his measure over the years and in totality, but yeah, it was definitely one of those things people tuned in to watch every week. So you can't have a 90s team without Jakovic and Carey in it, because they were it was just to grab your popcorn and tune in. It was absolutely fantastic. So look, we've got Wayne Carey at our centre half forward, and that completes our half forward line in this team. All right, moving on to our first forward pocket now, and that is going to be Gary Ablett Sr.
Best on the Brownlow. Here comes
So, Gary Ablett, where do we start? So, 4-time All-Australian, 1992 to 1995. Lee Matthews MVP in 93. Won 3 Colemans in a row, 93, 94 and 95. Was a 9-time, that's right, 9-time Cats leading goal kicker. 2-time Mark of the Year winner and winner of Mark of the Century, which, if you ask me, wasn't really a mark, but hey, it was spectacular. The list goes on. Top 5 player of all time for me. Look, West Coast and Geelong had massive rivalry in the 90s, so I actually hated him as a kid, but it was only because he was so good, you know? Plus, you know, we smashed him in True Granny, so fuck him. Also, probably, along with Wayne Carey, not one of the best examples of how to do life after footy. In fact, if you haven't seen it, go into YouTube and punch in Ablett cooked off his head. It's wild. It is absolutely wild. But look, to be honest, you've got to have him in this team, regardless of what you think of him as a human being. not that great. But look, he was the man, very much so in the 80s as well. I mean, I can't remember what year it was that he actually retired, but yeah, I mean, Gary Ablett, they called him God for a reason. Has to be in the team and has to be in the starting forward pocket. Absolutely, no questions asked. Now, the reason we couldn't put Gary Ablett at full forward is because there was some other guy. This guy, he was a big bustling man. He played for 2 clubs. He is the leading goal kicker in the AFL. He is none other than Tony Lockett, the great man. So why is Tony Lockett named in as full forward over someone like Ablett or someone like Wayne Carey or anything like that? And there's one reason and one reason only. Most ever goals kicked in the AFL. That's it. That is it. He was also, though, a 5-time All-Australian, 1991, 92, 94, no, not 94, 95, 96, 98. 4-time Coleman medalist, 87, 91, 96, 98, 16 seasons, and in 15 of those, he was his club's leading goal kicker. Just think about that for a second. That is insane. I remember sitting, the funniest thing I remember about Tony Lockett, to be honest, was sitting in my lounge room on my own, watching the footy. I think, like, I don't know, I was living with my dad at the time. He might have been having a nap because he worked night shift or something. And like, I'm just sitting in the lounge room on my own, watching a bit of footy. And all of a sudden, there's a pig with number 4 and plugger written on it, running around on the field. And I was just freaked. I'm like, is this actually happening? You wouldn't believe it.
There is a pig at full forward. He won't catch him.
Look, it was quite funny because it took them ages to catch him as well. Now, look, I know that's, obviously that's not what he was known for, but like, that's funnily enough, that is just my memory of Tony Lockett. And also the rule of you just don't stand in front of Tony Lockett. Like if you're a centre half back and he's just broken away from the fullback and is charging up the ground to meet the ground to get the ball. I mean, good luck if you're trying to back up and chop that off. I would love to know if there's someone out there who would have a stat on how many people Tony Lockett injured on the lead. That would be crazy. But look, I mean, again, there's no one else you could have here. It has to be Tony Lockett at full forward. And yeah, that's all there is to it. That is all there is to it. All right, so moving on to our last on-field position here in the forward pocket of our All-Australian team of the 90s. And this may very well be our most controversial pick of them all. Look, I don't think anyone's really going to expect this, but look, and look, you can call West Coast bias, you can say whatever you want, but we will explain how this is a fair pick. And the All-Australian forward pocket of the 90s is the Prince of Perth. It's King Cousins. Again, this may be controversial, but the numbers back it up. The only other person that came close, I think you might have in this position is maybe Tony Modra. But to me, that's just too many key forwards, right? So, like, yes, I know Modra was agile and liked a big mark, but so was Gary Ablett. You can't have Carey, Lyon, Ablett, Lockett, and Modra. It's just too much. So the only other small person who was named in a forward pocket that had multiple All-Australians was Ben Cousins. And it was twice. And what we'll do, we'll sort of throw up some numbers with Cousins and Modra because I feel like that's kind of the closest way to do it. But so they were both named twice All-Australian. Cousins in 98, 99, Modra in 93 and 97. Cousins won goal of the year in 99, Rising Star in 96. To be fair, Modra has a Coleman, which could probably come into play and did take Mark of the Year twice in the 90s. But again, I just don't think you can have 5 key forwards in a team. It's crazy. It's crazy talk. And again, along with James Hird, Cousins was the only other sort of small forward to be named multiple times in the All-Australian. So that's what we're doing. Come at me at the comments. But look, I think that's just where it has to go. Look, we all know about the downfall of Ben Cousins in the noughties, but watching him come up through the 90s as a small forward, and that's the other thing, he won the Rising Star as a small forward. He played as a forward pocket before being moved into the midfield in probably around 2001 and 2. And yeah, look, I just think you've got to have him in there. I mean, if you can imagine how crafty he was around goal, right? Like it was insane. Shrugging tackles, snapping him over the shoulder. He was a very good forward, which is why he became such a great goal-kicking midfielder later in his career. But look, for me, the last on-field position here, it has to be Cuz. It just has to be. And yeah, that's where we're going to roll with our last on-field position for the All-Australian team of the 90s. Check it out. So yeah, look, I think in totality, the forward line, I mean, you know, it's pretty lethal. I don't even think our back line could play against this forward line. I mean, they could obviously play, but I think they'd get probably smashed. I mean, what's going to happen, right? Silvani's going to take Lockett. He'll probably be outsized a bit in the goal square. You know, Silvani was very, very good on the, like, very quick on the lead and could probably spoil a lot of those chest marks that Plugger used to like to take on the lead. Who have we got? We'd probably be playing Paul Roos on Gary Ablett. We'd probably be playing Djakovic on Carey. You know, so like I said, it's I mean, Smart on Hurd, Hart on Cousins, and whoever else is left is playing on Gary Lyon. But yeah, look, I think the honourable mentions has to be Tony Modra. Was probably their closest player, and to be honest, originally I did sort of have him in here, but I just think for functionality purposes it just can't work. So look, I'm pretty happy with that. Again, drop me a note in the comments if you want to see something different, if you think someone else deserves a spot in here better than who I've put. But yeah, look, I'm pretty happy with that. So yeah, that's it. That is our on-field Division 4 team of the 90s. All right, moving on to the bench now. And our first bench player for this team is going to be Nathan Burke from the St Kilda Footy Club. Now, this one's crazy as well. Like, I didn't realize here's a sort of name. I remember him playing. I remember him playing with the helmet. And I remember him always being pretty good. But again, a bit like Robert Harvey, I didn't remember him being this good, right? So here's the ultimate utility player. 4-time All-Australian, named once in defense, once in the mids, and twice on the bench. He's going to be this team's Mr. Fix-It, you know? Like, I mean, look, unless we need goals, but I really don't see that happening. Well, not with this forward line. But yeah, look, I don't think we'll be left wanting for goals. Yeah, look, Nathan Burke, I think he's just numbers alone. He was, you know, there are guys who were named on field who were named on the All-Australian team twice. He was named in the All-Australian team in the 90s 4 times. And because 2 of them were on the bench, he's the perfect bench utility. And that is absolutely who we're going to have there in our first bench spot. All right, so our second bench spot is going to go to Mark Rasciuto from the Adelaide Crows. You know, we'll also be in conversation in the noughties, but we'll get to that later. He was an 8-time All-Australian, but only 3 of those in the 90s, in 94, 97, and 98. 97, 98 premiership years, mind you, as well. Probably did play his best footy in the noughties, but still was very good in the 90s. And is a guy who could probably, like, when Gary Lyon comes off the bench, if we're a bit tall, he's going to go on to that other flank. You know, he can link up with the mids. He can be a medium forward target in there as well. So yeah, that's sort of why he gets his spot there. I think for pure versatility, like I said, if our forward line's feeling a bit tall, you know, we can bring Gary Lyon to the bench. We can put Mark Rasciuto on for a little while, and that'll work there. So yeah, pretty happy with that one. Mark Rasciuto in our second bench spot. Our third and fourth bench spots, this is what I was talking about, that, you know, a lot of speed on the outside.
A lot of speed on the outside. Okay. Anything else? A lot of speed.
These are going to be the guys that are going to be, you know, chopping out Greg Williams, chopping out Robert Harvey and Nathan Buckley, and providing a bit of point of difference and some real fast, you know, burst speed through the middle. And the first one of those is going to be Paul Kelly from the Sydney Swans. Not Paul Kelly from the Gravy song, Paul Kelly from the Sydney Swans. 3-time All-Australian, 95, 96, and 97. Was the captain of Sydney from 93 to 2002. Won a Brownlow in 95, and again, burst speed, running out the front of the stoppages, link playing in transition between defense and offense. Paul Kelly has to be in this team and is you know, a great point of difference in the mids. As is our next player, Gavin Wanganeen. Again, 5-time All-Australian, 3 times in the 90s, 92, 93, 95. All-Australian 02 and 03 as well. Won a Brownlow in 93. Was a premiership player and, you know, can play wing, can play halfback. So a little bit of flexibility there. And again, a lot of speed on the outside.
A lot of speed.
So that essentially wraps up our All-Australian 22 for the 1990s. But we're not done yet. There's a couple of positions that still need to be filled. That's right. We need to talk captains, vice captain, and coach. And we'll start with the captains. And for me, for vice captain, for the leadership roles that he played and captain his side for a long time. And as much as I don't love it, because he's not he was never my favorite player, mainly because of the team that he plays for. But it goes to Nathan Buckley. I think you sort of got to park the bias there. And I think, you know, Bucks is the kind of guy who was an on-field leader. The way that he developed into a coach and the way that he, you know, just as a natural leader, I think he is going to be one of the right guys to really lead through the midfielder. I do think you have to have a leader who plays midfield, who can be around the ground and directing and things like that. So that's why we're going to have Nathan Buckley as our vice captain of this side. And the captain we're going to go with for very similar reasons, although not in the midfield, sorry, and that's Paul Roos. You know, we all know what an amazing coach he turned out to be, and the way he led. He was named All-Australian captain multiple times. He was the captain of Fitzroy for a very long time. So yeah, I think, look, there are other guys who are definitely in the conversation, and you know, when you're picking a side like this, right, everyone's kind of a leader, everyone's a good player. So, you know, a lot of the time you're just kind of splitting hairs, or it comes down to personal preference. But for me, I'm going to say it is Paul Roos as captain of this club. Well, not really a club, is it? It's a team. But yeah, we're going to go with that. And for the coach, again, I think this one's pretty straightforward. It's Kevin Sheedy, right? Like, it just sort of has to be. One of the few that was named All-Australian coach multiple times in the 90s. I actually don't have my notes right next to me now, so I can't remember who the others were. But, you know, there's your Moldhouses, there's your, you know, blah, 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 there's everyone else. But when I think coaches in the 90s, I mean, I think Kevin Sheedy, right? You know, I mean, it just makes sense to me. So that is what we're going to do. It is Kevin Sheedy. So that's it. That is our All-Australian team of the 1990s. Guys, thanks for sticking with me. I really hope you enjoyed the video. Look, we are very close to coming back with some more card content. Don't worry about that. Again, like I said, I'm not going full YouTube nuffy, but yeah, this is something that I actually thought was really fun. It was really fun doing the research for. So, look, thanks for sticking with me. Glad you enjoyed it. Again, if you're new to the channel and you are enjoying the content, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Like the video, get involved in the comments, tell me where I went wrong, do all that stuff. And yeah, hopefully we'll be back with some news about Footy Stars real soon. All right, guys, that'll be it for me. We'll see you in the next one. Peace.